These were not adventures. This was, we're here and we're broke. Maybe over there we can be less broke. Let's go over there. Okay. But to other people, these were adventures. You dared. And I think that was the key to it all. You dared.
Welcome to Digging Deep, True Stories of Big Change. Each episode of this podcast digs deep into one person's story of change to reveal a little bit about how and why we make big changes in our lives and what can be learned from these experiences. I'm your host, Kelly Styring, founder and principal researcher from Insight Farm, a consultancy that helps companies learn from their customers and consumers through deep conversation and connection, often told as stories like the one you'll hear on this podcast. So let's get the conversation started. Today's conversation features Robert Banfield, better known as Cowboy Bob, who leveraged his hard-earned experience as a carny operator not only to propel his business ventures far and wide, but also to marry the woman of his dreams. This story will range a bit, as happens with cowboys, starting with, in some ways, the twilight of the tale, then turning the clock back to carnival rites of passage that informed the building of a media machine. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Welcome, Cowboy Bob. How did you get that name?
How did I get that name? Principally, how we got to Cowboy Bob was I'm in the Cleveland marketplace. I am doing a television gig, and I have a bunch of sponsors that are sponsoring this show. One thing led to another, and I ended up becoming the executive producer of the show itself. And the host of the show started referring to the guy in the back office who wouldn't let him do this anymore, wouldn't let him do that anymore. And then it became that cowboy in the back office, right? Then it became Cowboy Bob.
Let me ask you a little bit about your current work. So you're the founder, president, CEO of Circle L.
Circle L Productions and Promotions. Circle L Productions means we put on the event. Promotions means we make sure that everybody knows the event's coming on. Okay, the advertising, marketing, promotions, right? So not only do I create the concept, I build the mechanism, I present it to the public, I create the marketing campaign, I do the advertising, and I go out and build the platform that the advertising carries on, whether it's radio or television. So, it was like I had my own television shows so consequently, I could advertise whatever I wanted to on my television shows. I had my own radio shows. I could advertise whatever I wanted on my radio shows. I did the events, whether they were rock concerts, country music concerts, card shows, football extravaganza, 8 years with the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. I had my own little network. I didn't have to pay anybody else to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. And basically that was sell tickets.
And would you say that that's something that you learned directly from the carny model?
Oh, sure. I couldn't tell you where else I would have gotten it.
At this point, Tracy, your wife and partner for more than 42 years, is no longer living. Can you talk about that and where you are in your professional life?
Tracy got sick in 2010. It was she had respiratory issues. She had been a asthmatic as a young child, but had kind of outgrown it. And then later on in life, there would be symptomatic problems that would come up, and eventually that was what she would pass away from, was respiratory failure. When Tracy got sick, I decided initially they said she's got 6 months, maybe a year. And at that particular point in time, I was just completely devastated. I was broke down. And all I could think of was, well, if she's only got a limited amount of time, then damn it, we're going to spend every minute together. So at that particular point in time, I sort of handed the reins of the company over to the kid. So where I'm at today is I'm functionally retired. I have some health issues, mostly mechanical, skeletal stuff. Life as a cowboy is hard. Okay, you pay for it later in life. But because of those limitations, I'm pretty much retired.
Tell me a little bit about how you and Tracy first met.
We worked in a restaurant together. I was kitchen manager. She was sort of the head waitress, and we didn't like each other. I thought she was snooty. I thought she was flipping for tips. In other words, she was flirting with the customers, wearing short skirts, doing the whole, being pretty and giggly and all that. And she was making good tips. She was good for business, but she was not the kind of girl that I was interested in, right? She was a player's girl, and I was a cowboy who was cooking for a living. She thought I was arrogant. She thought I was pig-headed. She thought I was very self-absorbed, and in a lot of ways I probably was. Not long, we worked together for, I don't know, maybe 6 months. Then there was some change in upper management. She left. Then we would run into each other again at a third party's house. We were visiting. Consequently, one thing led to another, and she said, "Hey, I live right upstairs. You want a cup of coffee?" And up we went. And we calculated it out, and it was roughly 36 hours nonstop. We sat on the couch in her living room, fully clothed. There was no physical contact. We sat and we talked, and we told each other our stories, and we told each other our dreams, and we told each other our ambitions. But at the end of that, we would then head off together, hitchhiking across America, and spend the next 42 years together.
So let's talk a little bit about how you ended up working at a carnival. And forgive me, is carny the right term? Is
Carny's the
that
right term.
okay?
Absolutely. You do not want to confuse circus people. Carnies are very sensitive about that. They're carnies. It is a career. It's a lifestyle. I ran away from home. Well, I was on the verge of running away from home. I knew I was leaving. I was making arrangements. I really didn't have a destination in mind, and there was no time clock. I just knew I had to get out of there before they killed me. So, and I mean that literally, physically, before somebody killed me.
At what age were you?
That first time out, I think I was 11, maybe 12.
And this was way before you met Tracy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Years, decade before I met Tracy.
Talk to me a little bit about carny life.
It's simple. It's straightforward. The people they're very cordial. They're very social amongst each other. There is a lot of interrelationships. There are often marriages between youngsters who grow up together on the carny circuit. In other words, their parents are professional carnival people, and so consequently the kids grow up, and this family and that family, and they end up spending years together like any kids in any neighborhood, fall in love and get married. And then of course they inherit the business. So sometimes you have generations under the same name. So you can go Claus Hamper's Carnivals. Okay. Well, Claus Hamper lived 150 years ago. And then in my day, what I ran across most were veterans, guys who had been through things that were so traumatic to them they could not come back to the reality of polite society. And so carnivals where they could hang out, they would be left alone. They could do their gig as long as they did it well. The boss paid them fine. They had food. They had everything they needed right there within the carnival family. And they could hibernate in their little trailer or their little mobile home and, just not have to deal with humanity at all.
Did you feel the same way when you were there?
Early on, it was survival instinct. There were times when, yeah, that would play a role in it. It was nobody there was judging me for who I was or what my quirks were. I had a function. I did my function. I made my money. I was social. I didn't, I was honest within the circle. I didn't steal, that kind of cheat, lie. And so consequently, yeah, it was kind of a place where nobody was hammering on me because my hair was too long or I wasn't wearing the right shoes or whatever the problems were in the social drama world. And the carnival world didn't really have all those rules. It was just, they really did live on a do unto others mentality. It was very simplistic, very, very level based. And one must understand that there is religion in most carnival communities. That religion is older than any religion that is taught today anywhere. Okay, so it predates Christianity, it predates Judaism, it predates it all. And it is the story of the gypsies, their whole philosophy of life and their ideas of, the tarot, arcana, mysticism, and all of that. They live in that world and they don't ask the rest of the world to deal with them. They stay unto themselves. They go around, they do what they do to entertain other people, and they live their lifestyle trying not to have to interact too much with common society. You don't see them hanging out at the mall. They're not going to be at the church social.
Does carny society have its own justice system?
Oh, yeah. Within. I mean, there is the law, and they are well aware of the law, right? Man's government's law. But within the circle, yes, very much tribal, a kind of tribal law. You
Can
know,
you give me an example? Or
if one person is accused of an offense against another person and there are subjectively enough witnesses that can say that the party being blamed is likely guilty because they have witnessed similar behavior in other circumstances, or they actually witnessed the offense, one can be anywhere from fined to ostracized to literally thrown out of the caravan, told to leave, blackballed. And that will bounce around to other carnivals too. I mean, there is that point where you can have your career destroyed.
does the boss make those decisions, or does the community make those decisions?
It's kind of a conglomeration, and in a way, it's a more matriarchal society than it is a patriarchal society. Although, for the point of force, Force, force and authority, there is a chieftain, but the chieftain can be called up or called down at any time by the clan. So the group as a collective can say they don't have faith in that individual, and that individual loses their authority. They no longer lead the band. But for business purposes, there has to be a contractual lead, right? So there has to be that corporate entity, that individual who can sign contracts with state fair boards and things like that, insurance programs, that kind of stuff, because they do have to play by the same games that everybody else does, right?
And that tends to be the boss or the chieftain. Are they the same person? Or are
Yeah,
they
it's usually he's probably the largest shareholder in the venture itself.
okay?
So might be the great grandson, but they own most of the equipment. Okay,
Okay.
and the rest of them are cousins that bring along their own gigs. So you got to remember, a carnival is set up, there are multiple elements there. So much in the same, I think that's what worked for me, is much in the same way that the kitchen works. So you have the pantry where they make salads, right? You have the bakery where they do desserts. You have the broiler section. You have the saute section. Okay, you have the quick line section. Each one presents its own activity under its own control system, but it takes the entire group to put out the meal that the customer purchases. And so Carnival is much the same way. You have the sideshow attraction, you have the haunted house, and then you have the games of chance on the midway. Then you have the mechanical rides. Then you have the food vendors. This is all generally, these people are very often related to each other. Might be second cousins or whatever, but it's a family thing that moves around from fair to fair to fair, and they schedule these every year. And the women run most of the business. The women do all the bookings. The men do the mechanics. The men are in charge of the heavy lifting and the mechanical stuff, and they're there to support authority. In other words, and that's the old hey Rube. Okay, you don't pick a fight with a carny. You pick a fight with every guy on the lot. It's like a biker gang without the motorcycles.
Excellent. So, what was your job?
I ran what they call plush games because I was small and I was young, but I had a big mouth. And there's nothing greater than going out to a college kid, upper high school college kid age, that 16 to 22 kind of thing, and have some little pipsqueak come out that's half your size and start challenging you in front of your girlfriend, and you're not man enough to put this football through that tire.
That's fun.
And
That's fun.
so I was a good hustler, and that's what I did. As what they call in the day is what they would have called a barker. I was Carnival Barker.
Now, had you left carny life by the time you met Tracy? Because you were cooking then.
No, actually, at the time, I had the county fair was in. I knew the carnival, knew the new ownership. I was not happy. Tracy had left the restaurant. I hadn't thought about her at all, and but I was ticked off with the new management too. The new things they were doing to try to salvage the corporation. Didn't like the policy changes. And so the carnival was headed into town. I knew who the guy was, and I got a hold of him and set up to run a booth. And so me and my roommate at the time, he and I were working at the restaurant together. So we both turned in our nose at the same time, and we went and took over running that game joint for 14 days. Because in 14 days, in that time frame, In 14 days, I could average in the neighborhood of $200, $250 a day. I was working in a restaurant where I was making, I think it was 6.25 an hour. I could slam half a year's income in 14 days working a plush booth, which is just a game. You know, they call it plush because it's where you win the little stuffed animals, right? Plush, right?
Right.
So it doesn't
Right.
matter what the game is. The game can be throw the hoops over the fishbowl. It can be any of a number of games. Okay.
Right.
But it's still a plush gig. It's a plush joint. And each joint is the actual little game venue where you play that particular game. Then you move on to the next joint next to it and play that little game.
So, talk to me about how you and Tracy decided to have a carny wedding and what that is.
I was working at the carnival. We're working the gig. We're about 9 days into this gig at the carnival. And here comes Tracy and her girlfriend down to Midway. She came looking for me.
How much time passed between the 36 hours together and the decision to get married?
2 days.
What motivated you to get married after 2 days?
Okay, see, you got to understand, in a sense, it was a lark. We were at the fair. The carnival is shutting down. Tracy is swearing to me that she wasn't kidding and she's serious and she wants to come with me. And, you know, we want to see what life is going to bring from here. We have no anticipation or expectation. Just let's go see what the world has to offer together. I'll watch your back, you watch mine. Okay. And I said, out of a lark, I said, well, I said, you know, we're here on a carny lot. I said, we're on a carny lot. I said, then we should do what everybody does. Okay, we're going to head out together as a team. Let's unify the contract. So we went and saw the owner, and he and I talked, and, you know, I'm collecting my pay. Then we went to see the fortune teller, who was the owner's wife. She read cards for us. Then we went from there. We went down by their command. We went down and the whole caravan gathered around and we rode the merry-go-round backwards. Now you got to understand, this wasn't a marriage. We had never agreed that we were going to spend forever together. We only had agreed that we would head off on an adventure together and watch each other's back. Romantically, we were still not romantically engaged here. Okay. I had not seen this girl naked. First and foremost, guys like me never think that they're going to get a girl like that. It changes everything in your life. You know, for one, you know, it takes you a little bit, but you gain confidence. You start going, hey, look at me, man. Every other guy in town wanted this girl, and every other guy in town was better situated to give her what she wanted in life, and she picks me.
Explain to me why the carousel goes backwards.
Well, because everybody rides it forwards, going clockwise. But this is a very special commitment. This is two people who are saying, I am turning my life, my soul over to you for protection, and you're doing the same to me. Okay. And so to do that, they ride together hand in hand, and the carousel goes backwards, counterclockwise, and it makes 3 revolutions. And at the end of the 3 revolutions, it stops, you step off, and it's like you just walked out of the church and everybody hollers and hoops and carries on. And then there's a great big party. Basically, it's an excuse to have a great big party. See, every night is a party, but a really big party, you need an excuse. If the two parties have decided that they no longer want to be in each other's company, that they want to break the bond that was made, to do so and have it be recognized throughout all of the carnival families. Okay, I mean, it gets around fast, right? So there's 1,000 carnivals out there running around the continental United States. You'd be surprised how fast the word gets spread around if you get blackballed or whatever, right? So consequently, you go back to the same congregation. So you go back to that specific carnival group where those were the witnesses that saw you make the commitment in the first place. And either he or she can now get on the merry-go-round and ride it around alone, demonstrating that they are no longer with this other individual and they are now free to enter into other relationships.
Is that also an excuse for a party?
Generally not. It might be excused for a couple of guys to sit in a trailer and get really bombed, but it wouldn't be a social event for the group.
How did your overall experience with carny life inform the rest of your life?
That's kind of a pronged fork kind of scenario, right? So on one, it demonstrated for me a sense of courage and self-confidence. I could. I knew I could, even at an early age, and I had evidence to prove it. It was cash in my pocket and acceptance by this group of adults who accepted me and treated me like one of them. The other part of that was I also would get an education in the world of the gypsies and the tarot and all of that, which had a very heavy influence throughout my life, still does. I've been a professional fortune teller. I'm also Robert St. Cloud. Okay, so in certain circles, I'm a fairly well-known and renowned intuitive reader. That part played a role in it. I would end up taking what I gained from the carny world business wise, and I would turn that into virtually every enterprise I ever had afterwards. I was good at what I did, but it was,
Mm-hmm.
it was never more than a cook. Okay. I was never trying to be Wolfgang Puck. Okay. I was just trying to put out a solid meal that you, the diner, could enjoy and would come back for again. And if you were satisfied, then my day was made. Okay. So when I got in the entertainment business, I used the same approach. No education. I didn't know any better. I was simply making the mechanics work to get the end product. And that had a life of its own that, when I did realize it, of course I jumped on it to make money, but I never did like the prestige. I prefer to be behind the camera, not on the camera, right? I'd rather be directing because I can see all the mechanics in front of me. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like going, okay, I know exactly what has to happen now in order to hook the mark. Okay, because it still goes back to the carny, right? How do I get you to come play my game? Even when you're losing, I get you to keep playing, keep convincing you that you could win next time. Okay, so if I can do that at 14 years old, and I'm 45 years old and I'm in the media television business, okay, along with concerts and entertainment, this kind of thing. I'm looking at all this and I'm going, yeah, man, I know exactly how to build these things so as to keep drawing the audiences. And if I'm drawing the audiences, then I got no problem. Hey, I was on a little tiny, privately owned, non network affiliated television station outside of the Cleveland ADI for the better part of a decade. And my shows were sponsored by AT&T, Sears, Budweiser, the Hertz Rent-A-Car. And I'm not talking to local business now. I'm talking to national accounts, the kind you have to go through Madison Avenue to get to.
So when you say in the carny life, you learned how to draw people in, are you then applying that to drawing in your advertisers or drawing in your audience or
Sure,
both?
I know what my advertiser wants. Okay. I mean, that's quite straight out. We know what the advertiser wants. So now you have to convince the advertiser that you've got the platform that will get them what they want, right? So you simply create an environment that is generous to the advertiser, and then you don't take the advertiser for more than the advertiser is willing to lose. Just like the carnival, never play the mark for more than the mark can afford. That's why it's 3 balls for a quarter. Tell you what, here's 3 more balls. Try it free. You're on the house. Oh, that was really close. I'll tell you what, 15 cents. I'll give you 3 balls for 15 cents. All right, here you go. Try it again. Come on, you could don't make me get out here and win a stuffed animal for your girlfriend. It's going to make you look really bad, man. Arrgh! $2.50 later, right? I finally give her a Cupid doll and say, hey, maybe you need a new boyfriend.
Are there any other business principles that you learned in carny life that you used in your businesses?
That would be very heavily colored by the biographies and autobiography of P.T. Barnum. Brilliant man in his own time. He really was. He saw enterprise in a way that other giant corporations had yet to figure out. And so a lot of what is in the carny world or the circus world, that would be a lot of that kind of philosophy. People want something. And if you provide what they want, they're willing to give you a reasonable amount of money in return for getting what they wanted if they can have it without hassles. Simple. Give the common man that which he seeks and desires, and in due course and gentle resolve, he will accept whatever it is you wish to bestow upon him. I wrote that. But if you think about it, it's true. It plays true in virtually every enterprise activity out there. Doesn't matter.
So, in addition to the business knowledge that you gained through this carny experience, were there moral learnings as well, or teachings or principles that you
That's
carried
the
forward?
cowboy. That's the cowboy. And I will tell you that where much of that came from an era when I was growing up, which would have been the latter half of the 50s. Okay. So in that time frame, as I was getting those early impressions in childhood of the way the world works, I was fascinated by TV Westerns. And then my family packed up from Canton, Ohio, and they decided to move to Scottsdale, Arizona. And in those days, Scottsdale, Arizona was still the westmost western town. Old boys still, they were still hitching posts out in front of every business downtown on the main drag. Guys still rode their horses in. I kind of grew up with that. And I sort of adopted those basic cowboy principles, you know, that John Wayne kind of, you did all right thing for the right reason, pilgrim, you know, and to me, that made sense.
Those principles fit more with the
Yeah,
cowboy
they made sense.
persona.
Right,
Okay. And
right.
then some of the business acumen is a combination of maybe
Well, and yeah,
what
and
you
you put the
learned.
two
And
together. You don't cheat a
yeah.
man on a horse deal, right? You don't try to pass off a cow for a bull. You know, there's, you know, you don't graze your animals on another man's land, right? So don't do things that are going to tick people off, and then they won't come wanting to bust you over the head.
Do you think going by the name Cowboy Bob implies these characteristics?
In some circles, yes. In other circles, they don't get it.
Does it
They
matter to
wouldn't
you?
get it if I explained it to them. No,
Do you
no, it
work?
does not. Isn't that the key to it all? No, it does not matter to me.
So let's talk about what's next. I understand you have a book in process.
Well, look, Tracy passed in 2018. Through the years, we would go off on our little sojourns and adventures through time, and we would come back from Ohio to Colorado to Arizona. We kind of followed a circle, and we would show up, and of course we find old friends and acquaintances, and then they'd all tell us all about it, and we'd tell them the stories, and they would say, you know, you guys should write a book. You've had such adventures. Well, to us, it was just surviving. These were not adventures. This was, we're here and we're broke. Maybe over there we can be less broke. Let's go over there. Okay. You know, but to other people, these were adventures. You know, you dared. And I think that was the key to it all. You dared, right? Nobody else was, no, I got to stay right here, man. I got to maintain this job. I can't say, oh, you know, I don't like this job. I'm going to go find something else. No, no, no. I got to just take it, keep my nose to the grindstone. We didn't do that. And so consequently, people said, you should write a book. What great adventures you've had. And we never did. We laughed about it from time to time, but we never really got into it. Neither one of us had that kind of an ego, right? And so Tracy passed in February 2018. I thought, well, I should write something, right? Write some kind of a eulogy or something, right? Because there was no funeral. She was cremated. A tribute to Tracy. I ended up with what you would find to be, I think it's chapter 14. And I'm like going, wow, this is way too much. I can't, but there's nothing here I want to extract. This is who Tracy was. And suddenly this light went off, bang. And it was like, it's that book.
And so has this book been published? Is it
No,
e-published?
no, no.
What's your plan?
When I started this project out, it was not a commercial venture. I decided that what I was going to do was I was going to write a legacy book. So if you could take into consideration modern conscious thinking, take into consideration the idea of going to ancestry.com and getting a compiled story of your ancestry and handing it to the next generation. When they say, Mommy, where did we come from? Here, read this, kid. Then as I got to writing, I realized it was really big, and I decided it was going to end up being a trilogy. So it was going to be virtually 600 to 700 pages all told, and that it would be bound as 3 separate volumes, volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. So I am kind of had an offer from an outfit in upstate New York. What I demand from the project is a finished book, ready to be bound. And then I would like that book to be taken to a professional binder and hardcover copy be produced of the entire manuscript in 3 volumes so that I can present that to my son so that it can become the family heirloom. Here's the story of Grandma and Grandpa. And since both Grandma and Grandpa were orphans, there's no family tree. We were Adam and Eve. That was always the joke. See, we saw that right off the get-go.
So you're planning to produce this as a bespoke heirloom for your family, and you're not planning to publish it anywhere else?
Well, no. And then the turnaround comes back to, well, but you can post it on Amazon or whatever, right? And if people want to download and read it, then they can pay for it. And if they pay for it, then you're going to make some money. Why not?
Do you hope ultimately it's produced as an
Yeah,
ebook?
but I haven't finished book 3.
You better get busy, man.
Yeah, well, I have been. I'm on like page 75 of book 3. I mean, one is like 224 and the other one's like 269.
Right.
So I'm shooting for 200 pages.
In closing, do you have any words of wisdom to share with our audience today?
How all this affected me is it really didn't click until I met her. She believed in me without question, without doubt, without condition. She believed in me. And the fact that she believed in me gave me the confidence to believe in myself. And from that point forward, nothing I laid my hands on didn't succeed. People need to start believing in themselves. So the best way to turn yourself around from a situation to another situation or start life over in general is, first and foremost, you got to believe in yourself, and put people around you who do believe in you. And they only give you more courage and confidence to move forward. And remember, Cowboy Bob said, play nice with each other.
You can listen to Cowboy Bob's podcast, Return of the Thinking Man, on YouTube by searching Return of the Thinking Man. I'll put a link in the show notes. Thank you for joining us today on Digging Deep, True Stories of Big Change. I'm your host, Kelly Styring, founder and principal researcher from Insight Farm. At Insight Farm, we help companies make their products better through conversation and connection with consumers, often told as stories like the one you've heard today. If you'd like us to help you with consumer research, or if you'd like to participate in this podcast and tell your story, reach out at www.insightfarm.com. We look forward to the conversation.